Hello everyone, this is Schaefer here with UDA Technologies, and we are just about ready to dive into the ConstructionSuite reporting capabilities. Today we're going to be focusing our Lunch and Learn session on getting the most out of your estimate reports in ConstructionSuite. So we're going to be kind of stepping through some of the options and talking about how you can take all of this great investment of time and resources putting together these perfect estimates, and then building from that really professional reports to provide a better presentation to your customers when you're selling jobs, when you're working on the details of existing projects, and even when we're closing out those jobs and doing like an end of project review. Here joining me today, of course, is Holly Gipson, another of our senior project specialists.
Hi, everyone.
Both.
Both,
All the specialists. Yeah. Now, we also have Sydney Dorsey, another of our senior product specialists, joining us today, fielding questions. So as we're working through this webinar today, don't forget, you guys can always take a look at the GoToWebinar panel. There should be an area on there marked questions, and if you have any questions, just click in there, type up your question, send it through. Sydney will be able to field any responses or questions or anything like that as they come in, and she'll also flag them for us during the webinar if she thinks that we should go over them. So send in all those questions, and we'll get started with those here shortly.
That's right. We'd love to hear more about, what you hope to get out of this meeting. Ian, like you mentioned, we'll really be covering a specific set of topics today, and I'm really excited for this webinar. Our goal with the Lunch and Learn sessions here is to really help you guys, our ConstructionSuite and Construction Online users, get the most out of the software. Make sure that you are not only using it, but really have all those tools at your disposal to take your business, to the next level as well. Those of you who are using OnCost Estimating already know that it is unrivaled, I think, in terms of what it can do in terms of estimating. I mean, it is just an outstanding estimating tool, and many of you, when you're first getting started, focus that time on learning how to put those estimates together. We definitely want to talk about those best practices there in terms of building the estimate. And then usually the next step is really what we'll be covering today is what happens next. What happens after I get that estimate built? What all can I now do with that information? And we've really built a fantastic collection of reports from proposal options that are going to really help in terms of winning the jobs, presenting the type of information that you need to your potential clients, all the way through generating project management reports, vendor reports, financial reports. So there's so much that you can do with that information in your estimate once you've got that built.
That's absolutely true. And also, as we're looking through this, again, I've mentioned our focus should be on the OnCost estimating and the reporting capabilities there. I do have a couple of questions here about scheduling. We'll try to take a little bit of time, probably near the end of the webinar, where we talk about that and some of the reporting capabilities that are there as well, especially since some of the information that we can create within the schedule from the estimate helps substantially when we're doing things like what are the big two? The earned value report and the cash flow reports. Yeah, two parts that show up in the schedule that either sync with or are created from the estimate. So they're definitely valuable ones that we're going to touch on here as well. Now, as we're diving in, let's start with the main interface. Again, just a quick reminder, this is the new ConstructionSuite 10 that we're going to be working within today. And what we're focused on is an estimate within a project. But of course, as you guys are working through these, most of your estimates and estimate templates are going to be available in the Estimating tab over on the left-hand side. You can click into and see the dashboard here, which gives you a quick overview on your typical cost breakdown across all of your active projects. Now, this is really great because this, at a glance, is going to show you what that breakdown is as an average across all of your jobs. Our goal should be to meet this average as we're estimating. You'll also see in here that we've got a quick list of change orders down below. Again, these are some of the high priority items. We want to make sure that we get those documented. If you're making new estimate templates, though, you're probably going to be working in the estimate templates section where you can see all the different estimates. If you open these, it's going to ask you to apply to one of your projects. And today we're going to be working within the Stokes residence. So I've already pulled one of our residential master templates to use on this project. The estimate itself is going to be built and kind of filled out. All the information is in there that we're going to be working with today, and you'll find it here. Here's our estimate that we're going to be looking at today. Opened within OnCost. And again, this follows our recommended structure for residential projects. Again, in this case, starting with the planning category, going through foundation, framing, exterior windows and doors, electrical systems, all the fun stuff. It follows the order of construction, typically, which helps us when we're discussing this with maybe lesser experts, we'll call them, the future homeowners. It helps them see how we plan these projects in the order that they can find progress as we go. And it's just a great starting point. Again, we've provided these templates and many more in ConstructionSuite, and even before that in Construction Office, for almost 20 years. We found a lot of success, but most importantly, our users, the clients that have come to us and used these platforms, have used these to great success as well, using them to win over usually anywhere from small, quick little remodeling projects to, in some cases, $2 million new homes, custom homes.
Yeah, exactly. I spoke with one of our clients. We had a chance, of course, to be at the International Builder Show this past year out in Vegas. I had a client come up to me just to really say hello and wanted to chat for a moment, but he happened to tell me or share with me that he had used ConstructionSuite to close over $50 million in projects for his company last year. So it was really exciting. I was so impressed. I was like, man, you are really doing great out there. So it's always good to hear, of course, about not only healthy markets that you guys are working in and success that you're having, but really see ConstructionSuite driving that.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I know we're focusing today's session on a lot of these reports, but one thing that I love about OnCost Estimating is that as you're working in OnCost, one thing that we do give you with that panel over on the right-hand side is what I think of as kind of an inline report. This is where, as you're building the estimate, starting to work with it, we do go ahead and summarize some of that information for you.
Right. And you'll even see this with the cost breakdown again. What we're looking at here, if you hover over any of these elements, is it just gives you a rough idea on how much each of these categories will cost, or the portion of the job that it fits. What we're looking at here in this quick review, in these estimate summary and the cost breakdown section, again, these are just numbers to help us make sure that we're not skipping over anything important in areas like a category totals breakdown, or again, totals by classification. It just allows us to meet that gut check as we estimate. Now, of course, once we have a finished estimate, I say finish here with air quotes because we know that they're always going to get negotiated and adjusted as we continue through this sales process. But as we finish the estimate itself, the very first thing that I recommend that you do is, of course, save it, and then start taking a look under the Reports tab for how we want to present this to the customer. Now, with most of our sales pipelines that you'll find, Holly has done a lot of work developing some of these sales pipelines based on her experience on sales. But as you take a look through that sales pipeline, you'll find that immediately after estimating, the first thing that we usually recommend is the presentation. Now, in the Reports tab, the very first report that you'll want to go to is actually the Proposal Wizard. Once we get all the numbers together, we get the company overhead margin plugged in, we tell the estimate how much money we want to make. Now we've got to put it together in a presentation that works well for your sales team to pitch to potential clients. Now, in this case, we've got a lot of different templates that we can start with. This project is a residential project that we're going to be looking at today. Of course, it works with commercial or anything like that as well. You just pick the group of templates that you're going to use. This is just going to give us a quick overview for the basic details for the contact and for the job. Then we get into which of the major templates that we want to pick for this particular presentation. Now, on the residential and commercial side, each side has 6 templates that you can work with. The majority of the information that changes, by the way, from template to template is how we keep all of the kind of descriptive or header information in place for these templates. So we've got quick previews for these, but of course you can edit any of the templates just by clicking the Edit Template link here. It automatically opens up the right template for you to make modifications to, and then if you like, you can even label it so that you remember next time which one is which.
Yeah, a lot of times you may need to have a specific style of proposal for a different type of job. I know many of you that I work with do, not just one type of project, but several. And so sometimes you may, have a layout that you prefer for a certain job type that you want to label a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Go here, edit the template, set it up initially, and that way you guys don't have to go through it. This, for us, has been really, really beneficial on putting together proposals that include like a boilerplate chunk of text or a description for the job, or I've even seen some of our users go in there and put the entire contract at the bottom of the proposal just so that they can combine steps. It might seem like a really simple thing, but if you do that, if you combine a couple of these steps, you're going to be saving minutes every time, which will amount to, over the course of the year, usually hours, if not a couple of days worth of time saved just by combining 2 or 3 steps. Now again, I'm going to be working with this option 1, so we're going to click Next. Great space here for a scope of work and special conditions, so we can come into and type in this information here as we need it. This is going to be my Franklin model home with outdoor patio, no driveway. And then special conditions if we have any. I don't for this job, so we're just going to keep pressing on. Now there's also going to be some additional core information here. On this page though, I want to point out that there's a little section where you can choose to include options that we've put into the estimate and allowances as well. This is actually going to show up near the top of the proposal as a separate section than the body, which is going to be the project totals portion. We'll get to that in a couple of steps. But this area just allows you to kind of extract or pull out these important talking points for your customer so that they can see them quickly at a glance without having to read through a lot of verbiage to get to those highlights. Especially important for allowances. We want to make the allowances one of the first areas that they see so that they know what their contribution is and so that we can avoid any costly delays on these projects by customers not knowing that they're supposed to make choices. Now, of course, as we press on through, there's an area for dimensions. We'll get into that as we get into more detailed estimating features, the advanced estimating features. But when we get into the project totals portion, like I said earlier, this is the real meat of the presentation. This is where we're going to be making some decisions on how much information we want to pull from the estimate for that presentation. Now, of course, my preferred selection here, my list of options that I like to work with, is a little different than what we have predefined. But what I recommend is including the company overhead margin, but prorating it into all the various different areas within the estimate or within the project totals portion. This is going to take all of that company overhead expenses and the profit margin and contingency values and just fold it into the cost. It makes it easier to present. It doesn't give the customer one big line item down at the bottom that looks like we're just charging them an arm and a leg. This is what it costs. And so rather than highlighting it as a separate value, I include it but prorate it so that it's just distributed evenly.
And that's such a great point to focus or highlight here. It's one of the most common questions that I think we get about building proposals in our estimating platform. This is probably the number one question that I get is, is there a way that I can present this so that my clients see a lot of detail, but they don't see a lot of detail about my profit or how much I'm making? And you'll have different contracts, of course, with different clients. So there may be times where you do want to show that information. But in general, we see that prorating into categories is a good best practice, fits the majority of situations really well. It allows you to give your client the detail that you want, makes that overhead and margin disappear, and it avoids the questions that you might get or kind of not opening up the discussion of having a client say, well, I see here that you're making 35%. I want to make sure I want that number down to 30. Can you do that? I think you've got the room to do that in the budget. You kind of just avoid that type of discussion by not highlighting that as a separate section.
That's right. And again, the other option here for prorating, we can have it separated out. If you're working on cost plus projects, of course, sometimes it helps. Prorating, for me, that's the standard for fixed fee contracts. If you're ever putting in a specific dollar amount, like in this case, $450,000 for the contract amount, if that's not going to change, that's just what we're putting in there. If it doesn't meet the customer's budget, we can talk about what we need to remove at a later date. But there's also an option here under prorating to prorate into allowances as well. I highly recommend against using this if you're including the allowances above. Now, the primary reason to have this is sometimes you just want to fold the cost in there. You've already provided a spreadsheet for your customers so they know what they're going to be working with maybe. We have a separate report that actually does a fantastic job of highlighting all of the allowances, so maybe you could include it and prorate it if you want to keep it even. If the proposal is the only document that they get, though, I want every allowance dollar amount, everywhere that it shows up, to to be consistent and to only show what they're allowed to spend. So I'm not going to prorate into allowances because I don't want my customer thinking that a $4,000 allowance for a smart fridge is actually $5,000 because of my company overhead margin. Again, this is a choice that I'm actively making. You have the option to do it either way. I recommend against prorating into allowances just to make the sales process more streamlined. Now, along those lines, the way I have this set up so far, it's going to include my categories and subcategories in the proposal. So I would see framing, a framing labor section. There would be a cost associated with it of $28,000 thereabouts, plus the company overhead margin, so it would probably be a little closer to $32,000 or $33,000. Just like before, I'm thinking about my sales process. A more comfortable sales process for me would be to omit the individual subtotals or the individual costs for each of these subcategories. I just want a subtotal for the category. I want it to show the $60,000 plus company overhead margin, and that's it. So I'm going to hide the individual breakdown and show category totals only. This is how that's done. I also love the idea of including notes. When I'm putting together a proposal, I want this to tell a story. And part of the story that I want to include will be things like general notes or specifications for the areas that we're going to be working on. And this is the easiest way to get that included as well. Now there's some additional selections down here at the bottom. I'm not using those for now. This is my recommendation right here. If we click Finish, you'll see the result. It's going to be a fantastic, very professional looking document. It's going to look a lot like Microsoft Word. In fact, we already got a question too, if we can import or copy between Word and OnPoint. And yes, absolutely you can. You can open up both of them side by side. Most importantly, though, you're probably going to be pulling in the work that you guys used to use in Word and applying it in here instead. And as you look through this, the proposal, let me have my letterhead back in again from the insert menu. The proposal is going to, once again, have things like the letterhead in here, little cover sheet for our proposal, and then it's going to get into a breakdown for the job and our client and some of the additional information in there. And then we get into job-specific info. Now again, scope for this project, we're working on the Franklin model home. That's not right. It's a good thing that we have these options in here for spell check as well. Otherwise, I'd be hopeless. Model, is that right? Yeah, maybe. But as you're working through this, you can make some of the adjustments here. And again, as we mentioned earlier, we can copy and paste back into this if we need to. We can spell check it as needed. Of course, it does all these fantastic things. But then once we get into the body, here it is. Now, as I mentioned, as we're looking through this, framing, for example, under framing labor, here's a little description of everything that we're going to be working with. You can obviously choose which areas we want to include. So if you don't want the bid notes, we can just remove those right now, or the next time we generate the proposal, we can just uncheck that box.
Not include, exactly.
But for the rest of this, we've got field notes, we've got general notes, we're listing out everything that we're working on, and then we're just providing a subtotal for each section. I find that this works really, really well, not just for residential projects, but a lot of commercial jobs as well. If you're a specialty contractor and you're working with GC who just wants a big number and just to go through the checklist and make sure everything's there, this is what they would want. They want it to look like this. They want the outline for everything. They want to see notes that make sure that you guys are explaining what you plan on doing. As a GC, if I'm pitching this to an investment team, same thing. The investment team isn't really going to know what all of these different sections are working with or anything like that, so you can skip over a lot of this additional information. And just as far as my comfort level selling jobs, this is it. This presents exactly the way I want to present. From here, I can actually just print the document out so I can take a paper copy with me, or more importantly from this page, we can also upload it to Construction Online so I can share it with my customers directly through a client portal or pull it up on my phone or a tablet once I get to the client's location or if I'm bringing them to mine.
Yep, and have them sign from there. Exactly.
Absolutely. Now for the rest of this, let me full screen this document. Again, you'll see a lot of the core information in here. If you ever wanted to move sections around or make adjustments, OnPoint is just like any other word processor that you've ever used. You can highlight areas, you can delete, you can undo, you can redo, you can cut, copy, paste. You can even insert images and things like that as well. So if you wanted to have a watermark, you can insert that. If you want to add some images or anything like that, you can plug those in too. We had a question already show up about page breaks. Just like before, if we needed to insert a page break anywhere, it's very easily done. You can set them up however you like, wherever you need. All the customization options you guys want, you have. And of course, once we're done, we can also click over and send it as an email attachment as well to get this into the customer's hands as quickly as possible so that I can, again, meet my goals internally of pushing it through the sales pipeline and getting to the next stage in the process and so on. There's one. Now, of course, this is my preference. As you'll find with everything, everybody has their own preference. Some of you I know like to use a more detailed approach on your proposals. Maybe you're completely open book, or maybe your sales process just it's benefited by having some more content to talk about. If that's the case, we can always go back to the estimate, open up the proposal wizard, and we're just going to change one option, just one. That's going to be in the project totals portion as well. And in this case, rather than using the simple project totals, we're going to print it as a table to make it a little bit more detailed. Now when we click next, it's going to ask us which columns we want to include. And so from here, again, if we chose to, we can include something like the description column. You'll still have the notes. Those are still going to be available. But in this case, if we wanted to be a little bit more itemized, we could go into and include quantities and unit costs and rooms and phases and totals by classifications. We can be really descriptive.
That's right. And actually, if we go back to that previous screen just for a moment, notice that, and again, we find that this works well for the majority of people. You know, I think, Ian, the way that you generated that proposal is the option that I see used the most and is typically also the one that I recommend. You will have some cases where you want to go ahead and include line items, you know, so with ConstructionSuite, you've got your categories, you have your subcategories, you have those line items. In some cases, you know, it may be a benefit to include those. So when you're maybe opting to generate that table to include those additional columns, you may want to opt to include line items just to flesh that list out a little bit more. You do have the option of, just like we saw, to include, when we're including those things, do we want to just list out the items or do we want to include individual pricing? So you can always kind of select a price detail level along with an information level of detail. And if you're doing something like remodeling work where you want to break things down by room, you can include a little subtotal at the bottom that's going to give you not only the full proposal, but then show, well, this is how it's going to break down on a room by room basis if you've structured your estimate that way. So a lot of additional small details that you can start to include in this proposal that are really custom to, you know, probably the way that you're working with your customers.
And the best part about it, by the way, is once you find this combination of settings that works best for you, the system will remember. You don't have to go back through and take screenshots so that you can remember which checkboxes to hit. No. Everything is going to stay checked so that once you find your sweet spot, it just helps you repeat it every time. You guys will be able to successfully recreate those proposals every time you need them. And just as a quick example for this one too, we'll generate the detailed proposal, primarily because this standard proposal that I work with, as compared to the detailed proposal, it's going to highlight the biggest difference between ConstructionSuite reports or on-cost estimating reports. Some of these reports, about half of them, are designed to tell a story, like this one. It kind of lists out everything, the way our owner, Michael Stevens, says it. He likes to have a title and a couple of bullet points and then a total. This works exactly like that. It's easy to read, it's nice for presentation, we can follow along with it well. We can quickly see where I've got my typos.
It's easy for your clients to digest. Usually it's such a great combination of, you know, readability along with the right amount of detail that's going to give the client exactly what they need.
True. Now, for those of us who are very number hungry, the other style of report, like this detailed proposal, might actually be your better fit. As we get down into the body of this, again, it's a little bit more styled as a spreadsheet. So we've got unit costs and we've got a price breakdown and we can start to get descriptions in here as well. It still generates as a table, so sometimes what you'll want to do is, where did I put the option for page layout? We might want to change the page orientation just so that the table fits a little nicer, and the presentation might appear a little cleaner. But again, as you're looking through this and you're working your way through it, you can adjust everything about it. One of the steps that I kind of skipped over in this case too is we're generating the project totals portion of this. You even have the option to choose the colors for your rows as you're generating this. Now I tend to use something that's very printer friendly, shades of gray. But if you have a color theme that you prefer or something that you want to fit your company, set it up, use it. And that way, once again, you'll be able to produce something that's not only a very professional layout and organization, but it also fits your company and your theme, which is really, really great. Now, one of the other questions that came through as well regarding pricing on this, most of these prices we actually generated from some of the homes that we built as a construction company before we became UDA Technologies, the software firm. That's where these estimates came from, not RS Means. But if you're working with RS Means, of course, the cost books are going to be available to you, those and your own custom cost books, so you can pull those into the estimates, and maybe this is where the numbers come from. If you wanted to itemize those out as well, in the proposal, there's a checkbox for that. I almost never check that box because I don't want my clients to try to price match me with like Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that. I just don't do that. I'm not interested in having that discussion. So again, same thing as before. Because I don't want to talk about that, I won't include it.
Leave that off, yeah.
Yeah. If my customers come back and ask for something like that, we could always go back through and generate a proposal that includes the itemized breakdown. I'm probably going to ask a different style of question though. Like, why does the customer want that? Why do they think they need that? Do I want a customer who's going to be trying to price against stuff like this and tell me that they're going to go buy all the 2x4s that we need for the job? No. So again, it just helps me find the right customer for the job with the presentation that I provide. Now, of course, as we're estimating through, the proposal is the most important first step. From the proposal, our next step is typically going to be to generate a contract. The contracts, you can find a list of, in ConstructionSuite under Contracts and Docs, you have available some over 200 different contract and document
almost,
templates.
Maybe over 300 at this point. We've added we've added what we include in our standard set for ConstructionSuite 10. I think everyone has over 300 documents and contracts included with your ConstructionSuite. So there's all sorts of great things in there, including some really outstanding, just industry standard contracts for new builds. You have your subcontractor contracts, you have design build agreements, so a lot of stuff that you can choose from kind of based on what type of work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And again, just like with all of the other report templates and everything like that, these contracts can be customized as well. So if you're working in an area where you need to add your own verbiage, or maybe even just import your own existing contract, maybe you've already worked with your legal team to generate one of those too, all of this can be added as well. In fact, from any of these, it's extremely easy to do. You just go to the File menu, and there's an option to import. These are the export options. There's an option to import from your existing file formats to include PDF. If you've got a PDF that you typically print out and then fill out by hand, skip the printout and like filling it out by hand is kind of the old way. In this case, what we would recommend you do instead is just import the PDF. It'll turn it back into a working document just like this one. You can go through and touch up anything that you need to touch up. You can even come to the Tools menu and add in a lot of auto-populating fields to replace the blanks that you had to fill in by hand every time. And again, we're saving steps. We're combining all this information to make it super fast and easy and efficient, and then super quick and easy to send out to your customers too.
That's right. And that's something that you can do on an individual contract or proposal basis. That's also something that you can do on the template level as well. So if you have certain things that you need to include for a specific job, anytime you generate one of these proposals or contracts or any of the documents that we're looking at today, you'll be able to then, once you've created it, you'll be able to edit. So you can come in and add things, copy things, paste things, all sorts of things that you can do. But if you find that you have things that you're going to need to be a part of every contract, your standard contract or your standard proposal, or I've even seen some people kind of combine a proposal with some contract verbiage at the bottom, so there's a lot of different things that you can do there. But you can edit those on a template level so that you don't have to do it each and every time. It's just going to auto-populate what you need.
In fact, let's go plug this in at the bottom of the proposal right now. of course, my proposal format. This is the one that I want to work with. So here we're going to come to the end. Just like was asked earlier, we're going to insert a page break, and then paste the new contract. And now we have both in one. Proposal, contract, 2 different areas to sign off on. Customer signs off on this one saying that we're going to proceed with this, and then sign off on the contract saying the dollar amount is correct.
Yep. And you build this into, if you went this route on the template level, then from then on, anytime you use that particular proposal option to generate a proposal, it would go ahead and give you this information here at the bottom. So all sorts of things that you can do there to, like you said, save steps. That's the goal here, is to save steps, maintain accuracy, maintain, solid contracts and proposals that you're going to give to your clients.
Now, a quick note on this as well. If we are going to be going through and making some changes, I highly recommend that all of you go to the Tools menu in OnPoint, go to Options, and double check your Autosave settings. As you're working through this, if you're typing up a lot of verbiage into a contract, or you're making a lot of adjustments to a report or something like this, turn on the Autosave so that you don't lose your work. Now, personally, I leave mine off because I'm pretty diligent about hitting that save button. As it turns out, I've lost a couple of contracts and reports in the past because I didn't do that and a computer crashed. But in your case, you can turn on the autosave, choose how often you want it to save, and then it'll just work. It'll take that extra step to protect you as you invest your time in putting together the perfect presentation. So, we've already gone through the proposal process. We've taken a look at some of the options that we've gotten in there. Once the customer decides to move forward with that proposal, we generate the contract. The contract is, again, very easy to work with, easy to put together. We can send it out, we can get it signed, we can pull it back in. All of that information is going to follow the process that we have lined out in the workflow that we have for the project in ConstructionSuite. Hopefully you're all using workflows. It's the second best feature in the program. And as you're working through the rest of this, though, now we have a project, and now it's time to start chopping up the information that you guys have within the estimate so that we can hand it off to a site supervisor, or a lead carpenter, or a project manager, or all three.
Or a vendor,
or it could be.
Yeah, could be anyone, yeah.
So we've got 4 main sections for the reports that you're going to be working with, and all 4 will be found in the report wizard as well. Now, the report wizard is a fantastic tool because it gives you all the different reports that are going to be available with a brief description of the report that you're going to be generating. So I'm going to start with project management reports first. We're going to take a look at the list of project management reports, and in the wizard it'll tell you, again, brief description of what each of these reports is designed for. So if we're looking through this and we've got a completed project totals, or we've got a completed estimate, one of the first steps that we want to go through might be generating a project totals report. Now, the project totals is designed to give a detailed summary of categories, subcategories, and items within the estimate. I know this because the wizard told me so. And if we click next, what you'll end up with is something that's going to be very similar in layout to the first project or the first proposal that I generated earlier. The difference here, though, being I want to provide this for a project manager, so I'm going to include the line items in this case. I'm going to keep my company overhead and margin separate. Or maybe, since we're handing this off to them, we don't even need it. We can exclude it altogether because my project manager doesn't need to know what we're using for the...
That's right. What they need is a working budget. So maybe in this case, we're going to exclude that information as opposed to choosing a Prorate option or something like that. That way they know the budget that they should be working with. They're not necessarily, involved in the profit side. So again, depending on how that works with you and your project management team, sometimes they're really involved with hitting a certain profit target on projects. Sometimes not as much, and that information's hidden. That's what these options are here for, is to really accommodate both of those. To even include the option to remove the line item markups too. So if you guys have built in a markup for all materials to cover waste and additional expenditures like that, maybe we remove that and try to steer the team towards hitting the budget numbers on the nose instead of giving them a little bit of wiggle room. I want to see how close they can get. That's true. Now, on the other hand, some companies I've worked with actually provide bonuses to their project management team based on meeting of a specific profit goal. So in that case, it's helpful to have them see the information so they know exactly what they're targeting for, and they're kind of motivated by something different. So you've got so many different ways that you can do this. When you look at these different wizards as we kind of go through to generate a report, we try to walk you through those options and provide explanations as to what those mean. You'll often see a collection of options. Really, with any report that you generate, that's going to be your first step, is that you'll see that box come up. You're going to have some options or things to choose from. Pay attention there. Those options are there to really give you ways to present the information based on the situation, and it allows you to have that estimate that's your core information. But depending on the report that you're generating and who you're giving it to, it really looks kind of totally different. So pay attention to those options. That's going to be the way to get what you need out of these reports.
True. Now, again, in this case, the project totals, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be very much like my proposal, with the removal of some of the things like the contract that we wanted to add onto the end of the proposal template. This one is going to be a slightly simpler form, but still a great tool to send off to your field staff so that they have the running budget for everything that we're working within. Now, if we go back to the report wizard, some of the additional reports that we have available here under the project management heading would include things like where did we put the labor report? A classification report. We can pull a classification report that just shows materials. Now, if I were to do this, generating what is effectively a materials list as the classification report shows my field staff what they have to work with on the materials side. Maybe we actually change it around and include everything and just have the classification line in there as well so that they can see the materials and the labor side by side. Again, this report is going to be much more detailed. It's going to provide a tabled layout with the quantities and the unit costs and the unit of measure and everything like that included, because my staff on the job site is going to need these numbers, need the specifics for what's going to show up. Now, I might change this around a little bit as well. Instead of the classification report, maybe we come under vendor reports and generate the material list here. This one is actually going to take that a step further and give you an option to filter by resource as well. Now, this as a report is a fantastic way to prepare your site supervisor for deliveries that are going to be showing up over the course of the next few weeks or months. From here, we could generate a separate material list for each vendor who's going to be working on this job. And it just gives it's almost like handing them the invoice that they should be receiving, so they can just check off all the items and materials and everything like that that are going to be showing up on the job site. Again, a perfect tool for this. I'm just going to generate the standard material list to show me everything, except that I have applied some filters there that didn't really want to work. Let me remove that resource filter since I don't need to filter by resources. I think we have.
And you can see that there are other options here. If you wanted to generate this only for maybe a certain category on the estimate, or if we wanted to generate this for, again, a certain a certain vendor, or maybe displaying certain columns on this report. A lot of choices about how this is going to be displayed.
Mm-hmm. And once the information comes together, again, this is more of a numbers-heavy report, less of a storytelling report. Again, our goal with this report, is to be able to go through and check off items or highlight things that we didn't have fulfilled in the last delivery. So as we're looking through this, again, we can see the quantity that we're supposed to receive, cost per unit for each of these things, unit of measure, all of this information is going to be available. This pulled from the materials portion, so it's just the materials on the job, and it's a great little summary or a reference sheet for anybody who's going to be working on this.
That's right. Now, one of the options that you saw when we were generating this report had to do with including items that did or did not have cost associated. You'll notice the heading on the report also references a bid request, so you can also use the materials list as a way of creating the framework of what you need. Maybe you don't have the costing information yet and you want to send this off to a vendor and ask them to prepare a bid or quote based on this quantity of material. So you can use this once you have your cost or pricing. You can also go ahead and use it before as you're building what you're going to actually need to complete this project.
Mm-hmm. And if you're sending this to a vendor or a supplier that you work with on a regular basis and you're just double checking prices, this is a great tool to use. If you're sending it to somebody new, though, and you're not entirely comfortable sending them the cost that you have, the unit costs for everything, maybe our assumption is that if we give them a unit cost, they're going to say, yeah, that's how much I charge for it, instead of saying, no, I charge 20% less. I would be shocked if somebody did say we charge less, but you never know. In our case, though, we provide a second report that doesn't include the cost. It includes a blank space for them to fill in their own costs. But here, as we're working through this, same as before, we can choose which categories we want to apply, filter down to a specific classification, choose which columns we want to include as available. But this one is going to omit the unit costs so that the vendor or supplier can fill those in for you and send it back. Again, similar style report, a little bit more space for them to work with as they're filling in the blanks for anything that they're going to be using. Same grade table layout. Still kind of has that spreadsheet feel to it. And in our case, we're just putting in the quantity and giving them the place to put in the cost and sales tax if applicable.
One great thing about the request for quote that you skipped over, Ian, so we may have to bring that back up because it's one thing that I really love to show off, is that you can also do this for multiple vendors at the same time. So if you need to create more than one of these, which you normally would for a project, you don't have to go through it every single time. You can actually, if you need to get multiple quotes for something, you can generate that RFQ for multiple vendors at the same time really quickly.
And along those lines too, there's two key areas in here that should be filled out on every estimate to take advantage of those filters that we're working with. Now the first one I've already got open. It's the classification column. I've been using that already as a means to filter down to a specific subset of data as we're working through the estimate. Setting your classification is also critically important on the estimating front if you use classification markups. Now I highly recommend classification markups for things like earlier we were talking about waste. All materials are going to carry with them some degree of waste, so we want to make sure that we put in a little bit of a buffer to cover that. Labor burden is another area that we want to always make sure that we have covered. So you'll put in a markup to cover labor burden, perhaps. If we have subcontractor fees, we want to make sure that we get those covered too. You get the idea. Putting in the classification markups hinges on that classification column being set appropriately. That's also really handy when you come to generating some of the reports. The second area, though, and probably more importantly for what you were just saying, Holly, is the resource column. Now, the resources would be the area where you're telling the estimate who we're using for subcontracted labor or where we're buying materials. Like in this case, for example, if I wanted to go through and assign a couple of different areas here, let's say that for framing labor, we're going to go into our contact groups and we're going to find a framing sub. Turner Framing has now been assigned. You'll notice that, Holly, the little summary bar over on the right is now updating to include totals by resource. Getting
So
those
now
in there
we
too.
can see how that breaks down by sub or supplier.
True. Now, as we add in the suppliers as well, you're going to be prompted in this case, because I'm applying Ajax to the first line, it's asking me if Ajax is going to be supplying all the materials in this section. For me, sure. We'll use Ajax for all of that. In fact, we'll use Ajax for a couple of different areas in here. Yep. They're going to love us after this job. And so on. You guys get the idea. Now, assigning these resources, again, this is the area where you're telling the estimate who's going to apply for which areas. The totals by resource is going to update accordingly. Most importantly, though, is you come into and generate things like purchase orders and subcontractor reports and RFQs. Almost all of these have an option to filter by resource. Almost all of them also have an option to generate a separate report for each resource. So for our purchase orders, we can generate all the POs at once. This allows us to do that. We just check all the right columns and the right boxes that are going to work for us in this case. I want my descriptions, quantities, unit costs. That's enough for me for now.
So right now we have the whole estimate selected. We have chosen all resources, and now we've chosen to create that for creating a separate report for each resource. So what's going to happen now is it's going to just, with one button, create all the POs.
It is. That's right. Well, all the POs for people who are assigned.
Which is the important part of kind of going back to those columns. So that's pretty amazing, though, when you think about how much time saving you can really get there. I mean, once you've got your structure in place the way that you like it, get in the habit of assigning those resources out. There's a lot that you can do really very quickly to kind of generate, again, super professional documents and reports, but that was really fast.
And it's always going to be this way as well. As you work through this, not only does it help you now with the reporting capabilities as we're generating purchase orders or RFQs or whatever it may be, this is also going to pay off in a huge amount. We'll be talking about this in 2 weeks as we take a look at the QuickBooks integration, but I am a tremendous advocate for sending over POs to QuickBooks, even if you don't typically use the PO system, but it just pre-fills in all of the information that we will be receiving on those vendor invoices or the bills that are going to be coming in. In this case, I could go to QuickBooks and manually enter in all these line items, or as we're generating these POs, I could sit down and open up a Word document and start typing away like mad. As you guys have already seen, I'm going to have a lot of typos if I try that. But as we're working through this automation, this kind of preloading of data based on a few small clicks and checkboxes here and there, just the amount that covers for you and your team moving forward and the amount of automation that it provides is just colossal. It's really going to change the way you work.
Now, another area that has a huge benefit, and as we approach the top of the hour, we're kind of coming up on that mark. I want to there's one more sort of major section that I want to make sure that we touch on. While we're transitioning into that, feel free to go ahead and begin chatting over any questions that you have or any reports that you're curious about that you want to make sure that we have a chance to look at before we wrap up today. But I know for me what that would be is kind of that last report section there is going to be, we've looked at project management, we've looked at some customer reports and proposals, we've looked at some things for vendors, but I know that financial reporting is going to be one of the things that we really recommend doing, not just in the beginning, but really this is going to happen throughout the job, where we're coming and pulling things like your estimate versus actual, or an over budget report, or some profitability numbers. So this financial report section is going to be something that I hope you return to often, and something that, again, you talk about colossal benefits. I think that you've got that information here covered for sure.
Absolutely. Now, as we're looking through these as well, this job was just awarded. Today we generated the contract and we went through and took a look at this. And I'm using air quotes to say that it was awarded. I know you guys can't see that, but the idea here is we'll be running some of the financial reports in a couple of weeks when we get into the QuickBooks portion. But as we're taking a look at some of the information that we have in here, the reports that you should be taking a look at on a regular basis include things like the estimate versus actuals. My expectation is that you guys will be running that report, if not weekly, at the most, or at the least once a month. It should be reviewed regularly. That's going to help you guys stay on target. Some of the other areas that you'll want to take a look at include the over budget report or the remaining balance report. As you start to finish out sections of the job, you're going to want to run things like the over budget report and the remaining balance report to make sure that the numbers that you have documented here match the numbers that you guys have running through your head at any given point. An over budget report does a fantastic job of showing you areas that you need to improve upon, not just on this job, but for future jobs too. If we're in the middle of working on this job and we've already found out that we're over budget on foundation framing and windows and doors, and we're currently bidding 3 or 4 other jobs, that's a pretty good indicator that maybe I need to go into those 3 or 4 estimates and adjust those numbers a little bit before we sign a contract. So again, these things are paying off immediately as long as you run them and use them regularly. And what they do is each of these reports is going to pull from typically 2 key values in the estimate. Most of the time it's going to be pretty obvious. Committed costs versus actual costs. What do we have in contract versus what we've already paid on those contracts? Estimate versus actuals. What's our budget? Where are we currently? Estimate versus invoiced. How much is the contract worth and how much have they paid us for it so far? Profitability is actually going to be invoiced versus actuals. So how much have we made versus how much have we spent? How profitable is this job? And then the other 2 are just variants on the estimate versus actuals report that are designed to omit everything that doesn't fit. Over budget report is supposed to show you only items where you went over budget. Remaining balance just shows you what's left. Usually, if you're estimating pretty close, the remaining balance report should show you where you haven't documented your costs yet. Now, of course, all of this information is still going to be available within the estimate as well. In fact, if you go back to the project totals page in the estimate, right-click on any of the column headers or go to View and Show Hide Columns, you can find all of the different values that we're going to be reporting off of here down near the bottom. We have the committed cost column and the invoiced amount column, actual cost, and the variance. As you turn on these columns, this is where we're going to be pulling those values and calculating out the results. So these, the total cost, total price, actual cost, committed cost, and invoiced amounts are going to be provided in those reports in slightly different ways. All of them are going to be available here. In fact, you can also get to them using trying to look around the microphone to see it right now. You've got some quick view buttons down at the bottom. The financial view highlights a couple of these columns a little bit more readily as well. Or if you like, you can go to the view menu and now create your own custom views. So you can manage a view, you can save it and title this as your financials view or whatever you like to have. And that's also going to give you, just like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of like defining a live reporting process, just to make it a little easier for you to see what you need without having to run reports. The reports, though, are fantastic if you ever need to hand them off to like an accountant or a bonding company or a project manager who just needs to see what the remaining balance looks like.
That's right. It's great to have those PDFs that are really official and something, concrete that you can put in someone's hand. But a lot of times when we're looking at getting this information, you also want to just make sure that your estimates and views and things that you're looking at are set up in such a way that you don't necessarily have to run those to get good information. You want to be able to spot things really quickly. Those predefined views are a great way of doing that. A lot of the dashboards that are built into ConstructionSuite are also a great way to come in and be able to get some of that at-a-glance information really, really quickly without necessarily generating a report.
And along those lines too, most of the dashboards, as before, are going to be pulling information that we've saved from this estimate. So as we're working through this, don't forget, you'll also want to come back to the File menu and save often. And as you're working through the estimate, there's also an option here to define an autosave as well. So if you want to set it to save every 15 minutes or 30 minutes perhaps or something like that, you can set that autosave here as well. Quick word of caution though, if you're making adjustments to one of your estimates, maybe because you're negotiating with your client, open up the original estimate and start by saving a revision. This is going to give you a second copy or I usually just call them revisions, or a negotiated copy so that you can maintain the original version and now have this as the primary one that we're going to be kind of adjusting the numbers on. Earlier, Holly, you made the comment about trying to get the 35 down to a 30% margin. Now, granted, I'm not going to do that, but we might be able to find a little bit of wiggle room somewhere else in the estimate. So we could go through and review and find out a couple of areas to remove or hide or even turn into options, perhaps, just to keep the cost a little bit lower. Maybe the customer is going to go try to find their own version, but we'll just keep it in as an option just in case. So you can make those adjustments without affecting the original. And if you have autosave turned on, it's always a best practice to save a copy first before you start making changes to it for things like that, for revisions and such. Now again, don't forget, if you guys do have questions, send those our way. We're coming close to the top of the hour, and that's typically when we wrap up these webinars. So while we're waiting for those additional questions to come in, one of the topics from the very beginning of the webinar was asking about some of the scheduling reports. Now, a really, really valuable tool in ConstructionSuite scheduling that most people don't even realize is available is, first, we need to create a schedule. I'm going to use this option to create my schedule from my estimate so that it'll carry over all of my costs and my categories and subcategories. So then all we have to do is put a time to them. Once we do this, now the schedule, which is going to be a Gantt chart schedule, will have the costs built in. And then as we go through and start moving our tasks out to where they belong, adding in any predecessor relationships or anything like that that might happen along the way, we're distributing our costs over a time frame that we can then go into the reports menu and run as a cash flow report. Again, hugely valuable tool in this case, because what most of us might not think about is the cash flow on this project is going to determine how often we need to be paying people, and we can start planning for some of these costs to be coming out of the bank account at some point. You know, this is all about setting the right kind of expectations, not just for you and your team, but the extended team as well, the subcontractors, and we can make sure that everything is planned out well there, and we can track those expenditures and see if we need to start planning accordingly. I love that the option is here, because It's super easy to put together a schedule, as you saw me doing there. You can just kind of drag and drop any of the items around as they need to be. But once you get all of this information in place wherever it needs to go, that cash flow report helps you prepare for the whole life of this job. You guys can set it up so that you know what's coming and how to plan for it, when to cut the checks, when to push back a little bit, when we need to set inspections, or when we need to start calling the bank on a more regular basis, whatever we have to do. It's all here and laid out.
Well, that's right. You can go ahead and run it. It gives you a nice visual way to really represent when you're going to have those chunks of money, of cash, how that's going to look for the project. So you're able to really visualize that, get it mapped out. It also allows you to, if there's adjustments that need to be made that you can make, it allows you to make a little bit of tweaks or kind of understand what that schedule should look like in terms of collecting payments and making payments. So you can go ahead and visualize that part of your project as well.
And then from here, you also have some of the additional reports. Somebody was asking about how to get a list out of this as well. We normally recommend using the scheduled task report to just pull almost like a checklist from the schedule with dates and with the resources and everything like that in the list as well. If you want to just print the schedule as is, before you do that, I recommend making some adjustments to the Gantt chart because what you see is what prints out. And so one of the first things that I want to do is show hide columns because I don't want my customers to see the prices when we try to print this estimate as it is. The cost will still be there, but we can uncheck the box so that we're hiding the dollar amount associated with these. That way, if and when we print, I'm not oversharing. Also, there's a little zoom slider in the bottom right-hand corner. You can zoom out a little bit as well before you print so that it doesn't try to print onto 80 pages. Maybe instead you can set this so that it prints onto just a couple or one large piece of paper perhaps or something like that. So again, what you see is what gets printed. Change what you see before you hit the print button just to make sure that you're getting the right result, what you hope to get. Okay. So I'm just going to go back through really quickly and review some of these questions. Now, again, just to reiterate, this is going to close most of what we have for you in the regularly scheduled webinar. Don't forget, 2 weeks from today, we're actually going to be going over Quickbooks integration and how it works within the estimates in ConstructionSuite. Between now and then, we also have a special guest joining us next Thursday, a gentleman by the name of Ed Earl, who has been doing kind of customer satisfaction work for 25 years.
Yeah, and remodeling and building work as well. So he's right there in the trenches with you guys. Has been a builder for I think close to 30 years at this point. So working with a lot of people, but has really built a following, helping contractors, helping builders really manage the relationship with their customers, and in particular how to do that using tools like Construction Online. Where does the client portal come into play? What place does that have in the relationship? How to use that effectively to really create those satisfied customers, how to present things like change orders. So a lot of great insight on how to not only, kind of use technology, but how that's going to translate to those great client relationships as well.
Absolutely. And again, he's going to be joining us next Thursday at 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. And so if you guys have a chance, I highly, highly recommend you join us for that. He's got some fantastic insights on how to use some of the software and the tools that we offer to create those perfect relationships with your clients so that they then go to all their friends and family and talk about how fantastic of a builder you are, which is what we want.
Exactly. Then the following week, our next Lunch and Learn, when we pick up, we'll be focusing on those best practices for QuickBooks integration. As Ian said, that's going to be a popular session, so definitely go ahead and sign up and reserve your seat. I know so many of you are using QuickBooks, wanting to integrate with QuickBooks, or already doing that and maybe wanting to expand that a little bit. We'll be talking about best practices for your QuickBooks integration, how to get that set up, what options we recommend there, and really what your results are going to be when you're integrating with QuickBooks.
And so
Now we did.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think with that, we're about running out of time. We did have a great question come in about what types of templates that we offer on the estimating side. I know, Ian, you've been using one of our standard residential kind of master or sample templates. That's just one of the options that we have loaded in ConstructionSuite. So if you're just getting started with ConstructionSuite, or maybe just looking for the right solution for your company, one thing to kind of note, so we talked a little bit about the contracts. We've got over 300 contracts and documents that are going to be provided as part of your package, so make sure you're taking advantage of those. On the estimate side of things, we're going to have a collection of templates that you can use, and those are going to include master level templates for both residential and commercial work. If you're working with a commercial version, you're going to get not only those commercial master templates, but you're also going to get those standard CSI 16 and 50 division formats that are going to be included. We also provide some subcontractor estimate templates, going ahead and giving you a head start on maybe if you're needing to bid just a plumbing or electrical portion of the job. So we work with lots of different types of contractors. So your contract and template packages that are included are going to really have all of those types of jobs covered.
Absolutely. And what you'll find with all of these templates, just like before, they're fantastic starting points. It's a great launching point for anything that you need to work with. And then you can customize them to make them your own. For example, we have a remodeling master. We've customized this one a little bit to create a kitchen remodel. We might customize it further to make a bathroom remodel, but we always have that master that could cover the entire home if we needed to. It just allows us to kind of focus in on some more specific detail.
That's right. And some of you may have, a template or kind of a structure that you like to use. I do sometimes see people come in and just start from scratch with a blank estimate and build out their template. So that's an option as well. So you can always customize that, but we want to make sure that what we're providing kind of out of the box for ConstructionSuite will give you a real head start. We've got, these are kind of based on industry standard ways of putting together the estimate, whether that's the CSI divisions or the NAHB structure with the residential stuff. So you've kind of got a standard in place that you can then modify and save over if you need to, but again, you've always got that structure that we're providing there as well. Same thing for your schedules, in case anyone is curious there. Just like we provide estimate templates, there are schedule templates included. Many of you are going to be creating those schedules from the estimate like we just looked at, so you won't always start your schedule with a template, but if you do kind of need to make a schedule separate from an estimate, there's going to be a template library available for that as well.
Mm-hmm. And all of these are going to be available with the residential versions. All of these templates are going to be available with all versions of ConstructionSuite. Again, Holly, as you mentioned earlier, for those of you who are signing up for the commercial versions, there are additional templates that you'll receive. In fact, I think one that I see also used pretty heavily on the commercial side is the light commercial template. The light commercial master is a fantastic tool for doing things like tenant improvement projects or office build outs or anything like that. So again, there is a right tool for every job available within ConstructionSuite right out of the box. And then as you guys want to refine them, it couldn't be easier to get that done. In fact, what I typically do for any of like the spec homes or the production homes or the regular things, I'll even take my favorite estimating template, my favorite scheduling template, some of the contracts that we want to use, and put it all together in one as a project template, which we could then use and make it even easier to combine these steps and to speed up that estimating process. Now, again, as we mentioned though, we are unfortunately out of time. So today we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Don't forget, join us next week where we bring Ed Earl in as a special guest to talk about happy clients and how they can make your business better. Then we're going to be talking about QuickBooks the following week, and we will, as always, be looking for new ways to provide additional tools and resources. So we'll be building out some great webinars for you guys in the month of July as well. If you guys have anything that you're really interested in seeing or having provided to you or your team, don't forget, you can always reach us here by phone at 1-800-700-8321 or via email, info@uda1.com. All this information, by the way, is on our website, or if you're already using ConstructionSuite, you can find it in the help menu under contact information. For everything else, though, give us a call or send us an email. But for today, we're going to wrap and close out the recording for the session as well, for those of you guys who want to come back and see it. And for everybody who joined us, thank you so much for your time and your attention. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. Hopefully we'll talk again soon, and until then, have a great day.
Thanks again, everyone.